Alright guys, we're going to finish up the lid by drawing the side flaps in. The idea here is that instead of trying to draw the whole thing and make it look symmetrical, which means even on both sides, we just draw half of it, then we copy it and reflect the other side over, and then put a gradient over the top. Now you can either eyeball this, or if you need to, go ahead and drag one of these photos over and literally trace the cup, and then you can make it bigger or smaller to fit yours. But I'm just going to go ahead and do it the pen tool way. One of the annoying things about the pen tool is that whatever the last layer effect that you were using, it tends to remember. So you're going to notice mine comes out kind of gradienty, and then I'm going to go ahead and go back. So I'm still using the basic curve of the cup. Remember, in Photoshop, you can't just click here to change direction. You have to use the Alt key. So Alt click, and I'm going to go ahead and put a little bubble right there. Alt click, I'm going to give it another little bubble right there, and then I'm going to go ahead and go kind of below my center point that I started on, and this will determine kind of the thickness of your cup. There we go. Alt click, change direction, and I'm going to go ahead and close. Now all I'm going to do is just duplicate that layer. So I just right click, duplicate. Doesn't look like anything happened until you use the move tool and you notice that it's sitting right on top of itself. I want to go to edit, transform path, flip horizontal. You'll notice it flips it around. Now I just kind of want to make sure it covers up the brown of the cup and line those up. Looks like I need to move the previous one up a little bit. Line them up. There we go. What I'm going to do is, now that they're lined up together, I'm going to go ahead and shift select, which means both of them are selected, and I'm going to say merge layers, which is Command E, and it's going to make them one shape. This makes it easier because now when I double click to bring up my layer options, I can put the gradient over both of them instead of it only putting it on one apiece. Now when I switch to my gradient, I want to click on the gradient editor, and on the sides we're looking at a gray. So I'm going to click both of those and choose a gray, similar to my cup. But in the middle here, I want to add a bucket, and this bucket is going to make it go to 0 opacity, so it fades from gray to transparent to gray again. Once again, it's going top to bottom. I don't really like that, so I'm going to change the angle to 0, so it should be side to side. Now, if the original color of your shape was too dark, you may need to go back and lighten it up like I do. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and throw some white in there, because I want to purposely lighten mine up. I'm going to bring that opacity back a little bit. It's a little too shiny. There we go, gray to white to gray. And there's the side of the cup. He gives you the exact colors here if you want to use them. But we're going to go ahead and move on to the next step, which is putting some manual shading. Basically, he's just using the pen tool, and you can do it exactly like him to add some lines of texture in there. How you stylize it, I'm not going to require it. He blurs those. He puts a shadow in here and a highlight. I'm not too worried about that. You can stylize it however you want, just to give it that three-dimensional look. But the one styling I do want to do is to put a shadow. And this is actually really easy because we've done some of this before. Make a circle path. So here we go. Boom. And I'm going to go ahead and pull it kind of the width of the cup. If you can see that I want it to take up where the brown of the cup is touching. So Command T to make it kind of fit. There we go. And I'm just going to fill this with black. So I double click the color after I hit enter. And I'm just going to fill it with pure black. So it looks like it's running the width of the cup. And I need to move it down a little bit, so I'm going to move it down in my layer so it's actually underneath the lid. So here we go. Moving it down. And you can still see that little bit of black underneath. It looks like a shadow. And the last step is to just go ahead and blur it. Select, filter, Gaussian blur, and it looks like a shadow. Now the nice thing about that is I'm going to duplicate that layer. So I've got a double, and I'm going to move this underneath the cup. So this one's going to go all the way to the very bottom, so it's the last layer, and it's underneath the cup. But what I can do is I'm going to blur this one just a little bit more, and I'm going to take its opacity down. And then I'm going to shrink it down so it kind of fits the edges of my cup. And then it looks like a shadow. You can bring the opacity up. I don't really care how dark or light your shadow is, just as long as you have one. So you can see we did those steps. We've got a shadow underneath. And the last thing is we're going to put this kind of cool abstract swirl shape on top of the cup. That's pretty easy to do, and you can use whatever you want. You just go to the internet, abstract vector. That way I know it's going to get me some sort of weird shape. I go to images, and there's all sorts of stuff. Black and white tends to work really well, but I'm not going to force you to stick to that. You can pretty much use anything. I could take this, bring it in, and I want this to be on the very top. And I'm going to switch it to overlay so I can see through it. And you can see that I'm laying this pattern on top of my cup. And all you had to do was kind of switch it to overlay. But there's some stuff splashing over onto the edge of the cup that I don't want. So once again, we can command click our original shape of the cup. And what I'm going to do is say, I've got this cup selected, but I'm going to do select inverse, which means everything except for what I have selected. Go back up to that layer, that graphic, and hit delete, and it's going to erase all the parts that are not on the cup. And I do want to now move this underneath the lid because I don't want it spilling over onto the lid. And there I've put a little guy on my cup. You can literally do that with any kind of design that you want. Just switch it to overlay. Okay, that's your cup. Do file, save for web and devices, and post it to your blog. Mostly what I'm looking for when I grade is that you were able to make the cup, the fibers, the texture, that you made the lid, and it has some gradients and some blending modes, and the shadows are there, and then finally there's this graphic on top.